years ago, on December 10th, 1993, a small little property you may have heard of was released into the world called Doom that changed the video game landscape forever. Even now, in almost 2022, this game totally holds up in a way that only a creative work that has had a team of dedicated, passionate people working behind it can. What makes Doom so incredible and hold up so well is that it's this cohesive artistic work where all of the different themes help to reinforce each other. Or, put shortly, Doom is basically just a metal band's album artwork come to life that you can now participate and take part in. From the name Doom, to the artwork, to the setting, the music, the overall sound design, it's an immersive and addicting formula that was fully fleshed out from the very start of release day. Now, if you've been to my channel before, you're probably thinking, Rob, your channel is about guitar reviews and shreddy guitar stuff. Why in the world are you talking about this 30-year-old video game? Well, keep watching, and in this video, I'm going to go into nauseating detail of why I think Doom is awesome, why it holds up so well, and why it ultimately inspired me to go down one of the longest, most daunting musical projects that I've ever taken on. Right from the very start of the game, the second you enter Doom's iconic first level, E1M1, and you hear Bobby Prince's iconic track At Doom's Gate with its fast-paced driving and shreddy guitars, you know instantly what this game is going to be. It's going to be a fast-paced trip into the gates of hell, just like any good metal band's album artwork. Your character, the beloved Doom guy, can run at breakneck speed indefinitely, never tiring. As your arsenal expands and you acquire more and more firepower, the cartoony nature of the gameplay is complemented by more and more driving, shredding guitars piloting Doom Guy into the depths of hell. So it's the cartoony nature of the gameplay, like being able to pick up a berserk pack and punch a demon to death with one punch of a brass knuckle, that the limitation of the MIDI of the soundtrack actually serves to complement the gameplay and the overall experience. The genius of Doom is kind of like the urban legend I've always heard about Black Sabbath and how they decided to create scary music. The story that I've always heard is that they were walking past a movie theater with a line out the front door and were curious why so many people wanted to see a scary movie, and that was the brainwave that made them think to create scary music. I don't really know how true that necessarily is, but I love that anecdote and that idea. Doom is genius because it's metal in all of its aggressive awesomeness, but also its sometimes kind of quirky silliness. Music is the easy thing to forget about when it comes to creating ambiance and the perfect vibe for whatever it is in life. Bob Marley is for having a beer at the beach, Pitbull is for fist pumping at the Ocean Drive in Sea Isle City, John Legend is for the bedroom, and metal is for sending hordes of demons back to the depths of hell and beyond. So on its surface, the easiest thing to pick that makes Doom genius is the fast-paced gameplay, and that is the bedrock for what makes the game so addictive. But I'm here to argue that there's a whole lot more than just fast gameplay that makes it so much fun. It makes it so much better than just its title of really inventing the modern first-person shooter genre. Doom really does deliver on every level, and it's a huge testament to the technical wizardry of John Carmack and his ability to get Doom to quote-unquote run on everything, as well as John Romero's genius level design. Sprinting around the levels with your increasingly cartoony, ridiculous, fast-paced weaponry is so addicting, and it holds up so well today, even in almost 2022. And And speaking about level design, I think one of the best aspects of Doom is its puzzles and its traps and its overall level design. It's much more clever in ways that I feel like a lot of modern video games, and yes, I'm definitely looking at you, Naughty Dog, with your unbelievably lazy ladder puzzles and rope puzzles from The Last of Us. Doom is engaging and engrossing in a way that these modern games just totally suck at. Now, as outlined in Tim Rogers and Action Button's epic 3.5-hour Doom review, Doom has essentially two flavors to its gameplay: search and destroy. And that first part of search is one of my favorite aspects of Doom. You need to find your way through the level without really any hints. You have to locate the key cards, try to find the secret areas with all the extra weapon stashes, and it never is in an obvious way like those Naughty Dog games that kind of feel insulting to the player. These puzzles are clever and satisfying in a way that makes this core mechanic of search engaging and rewarding, and makes me continue to want to find those new areas full of monsters to destroy. I also love, for the most part, except for the stupid arrow on the ground in the urban map in Doom 2, that you never really get any hints. It's up to you as the player to explore, and it's up to you to figure out just how deep and just how thorough you want to get to know each level. Especially when it comes to locating those secret areas chock full of all of the extra goodies that makes your rampage deeper and deeper into the depths of the hell easier and easier and more engaging. It's well known throughout most of the Doom circles that the levels of the original Doom 1993 are probably the pinnacle of the maps, although there are some that I really love from Doom 2. So while Doom 2's overall level design might not hold up quite as well as the original Doom, there is something about those additions that they added to Doom 2 that makes me almost think of it just like a DLC. It's just like an expansion for the original game. Some of these additions are so iconic, it's hard to think of classic old school 90s Doom and not think of them. So something like the Super Shotgun, which is arguably one of the best weapons in gaming of all time, or such enemies like the Archvile. I remember the first time I encountered the Archvile, it took me a hot minute to figure out how to possibly attack them and not just immediately get killed. It's also worthwhile to point out that when Doom launched, it also somehow had a multiplayer online component included as well. So as if inventing the first-person shooter wasn't enough, they also invented essentially online gameplay and the PvP sort of format that you see with the success of other games like Fortnite currently. So the fast-paced gameplay, the tight, cohesive artistic vision with the name linked to the setting connects directly to the music. And I think the music and sound design of Doom is one of those things that really helped set it apart and become so iconic in everyone's collective memory. In a very similar way that I would argue the sound design is what made the original Star Wars so freaking cool. It's the way the lightsabers sounded, the way that the ships sounded, John Williams' epic score. All of these things is what made Star Wars stand above the other 70s sci-fi movies. And there's plenty of them with a Luke Skywalker-esque kind of a protagonist, but to me, in my mind, especially when I was a kid, and I think this even holds true in the really crappy prequels and the even worse Disney Star Wars movies, it's the sound design that sticks in everyone's mind. And I'm gonna argue that that's the key thing that made Doom stand apart from all of the other games and really stick in everyone's collective memory. So if you've never heard of Action Button or Tim Rogers, he's this kind of quirky, sort of awkward, but totally lovable video game developer who lived in Japan for a while and has sort of a long career in the video game industry. In his epic 3.5-hour review of Doom, he outed himself as a video game poser, and the major reason for this was many people that he knew thought Doom was genius in the 90s, and he thought it was fine, but never quite hooked him the way it was hooking everyone else. The computer he first played it on was his dad's old work computer, and his dad did not listen to his buddy at work's advice to buy the Sound Blaster audio card that was required in order to hear Bobby Prince's MIDI bleeps and bloops. So he just didn't get it, because he played Doom silently with no sound whatsoever. It was only till many years later that he finally played Doom and was able to hear it in all of its MIDI bleeps and bloops glory that he finally got how fucking genius and how metal and addicting Doom is. The funny thing here is my experience with Doom as a child was pretty much the exact opposite. I had a computer with an audio card that was able to actually play the music, but it was unable to actually play the game. Despite the moniker that Doom runs everything on whatever my computer was, a 186, I don't even remember, it was unable to play it more than like 1 frame a second. The thing that was seared into my 9-year-old brain, despite not really being able to play the game, was being able to hear the game. Being able to hear the monsters, hear the rack of the shotgun, hear the blast of the BFG, and those were the things that were seared into my memory. So much so that even as a child, I tried to do everything I possibly could to get the game to run on the computer, up to and including accidentally deleting the operating system in a desperate attempt to make more room on the hard drive, which for some reason in my 9-year-old brain was the only way to get the game to work, not realizing it would break the entire computer and get me in a ton of trouble. So despite the game being in this hilarious unplayable state, I was totally hooked and never forgot about how cool Doom seemed and how badly I wanted to explore these worlds and see what the game had to offer. So fast forward all of those years since the mid-90s, and it wasn't until a little thing called COVID rolled around and basically shut down my very grueling gigging schedule and had me sitting around with all of this extra time that I started searching for something to do. At the time, I hadn't owned any video game systems since a PS2 back in like 2005, and hadn't really played any games at all since around Red Dead Redemption in 2011-2012. The most logical start was, being that I had an old Mac Pro Tower, I just tried to look around and find out what sort of game I could possibly get to play on the hardware that I had, being as I didn't feel like spending the money on something like a PS4. This led me to, I know, the dreaded GZ Doom. But hey, I was able to get the game up and running on my Mac computer and gave me something to do with all of this free time I hadn't had in 10 years. Being able to boot up and run Doom locked at this crazy smooth frame rate, being able to move my mouse to move Doom Guy around quicker and more accurately, and the fact that I was playing this game with $1,500 music reference speakers definitely helped make the sound design and music pop in a way that I'm sure Bobby Prince definitely had in mind when he was creating all of the music. All of these aspects of the sound design are f***ing cool. There's really no other way to put it. The way the rocket launcher sounds, the BFG, the plasma rifle, the roar of the cyber demon or other enemies when they spot you. If you've never played Doom with a decent pair of headphones or speakers, I would highly recommend it. The MIDI definitely sounds better than you think it does. Now, how does this all connect to me and my music channel? Well, firstly, one of the most important things that we learned in music school is how to be creative within boundaries. In other words, how to write something that's genuine and part of a musical tradition that doesn't sound like you're faking it. That means that you can't write whatever you want to write, you need to write something that fits in that genre. So, if you're going to be filling in a country band, you need to play country licks, not shreddy metal licks. If you're going to be playing in a jazz band, you need vocab, otherwise you're gonna sound out of place. And that's the thing that blows me away the most with Bobby Prince's score. As a metal guitar player, playing through this game and hearing his lines and realizing I knew exactly how to play those lines in the game. In other words, the soundtrack and all of his lines are guitaristic, for lack of a better term. In other words, despite most likely being programmed on a keyboard, they're written in a way that makes sense as a guitar player. This might seem trivial, but it's actually really challenging to do as a composer. It was something that we explored at Berkeley in a guitar synth class that I took. With a guitar synth, you're able to make your guitar sound like, let's say, a flute. But the problem with that is if you pick up your guitar and start playing your regular lines just with a flute sound, it's not going to sound like a flute player because you're not phrasing like a flute player. You're not thinking flutistically, if that makes sense. The thing about the soundtrack of Doom is that it's so much more than just fast, driving, shreddy guitars. It's a celebration of one of music's most dismissed, rich, and misunderstood genre. Metal can be so much more than just aggressive. It can be atmospheric, driving, it can groove, it can have blues elements, it can be pretty, it can be unsettling. Metal is one of the most sonically diverse genres out there. And that's what makes me love metal so much and what drove me to want to become a metal musician. The Doom soundtrack has so much more to offer than just the track that everybody knows, E1M1 at Doom's Gate. But it also has beautiful and unsettling ambient and sound design-esque kind of tracks like in Sign of Evil or Victory. It also has driving, crazy blues tracks with Eric Johnson-esque shreddy lines like you hear in I Saw the Demon. And it's the way that he was able to work in this MIDI limitation and still create all of these things in genre in a way that connected to everything that was going on in metal then and even now in the future. It just reminds me of the way the Beatles could create such a great recording with just an 8-track. You know, they didn't let those limitations stop them from creating their art. And finding a way to be creative within those limitations, that's really what any good artist has to do. The way that he seemingly took the time to put these songs in keys that worked well with the guitar really blew my mind. I would hear lines like those shreddy Eric Johnson ones from I Saw the Demon and knew immediately, I know how to play that. I know what that is. I know the picking technique that I need to play that line. I know the distribution of notes per string in order to be able to play it, and knew that that line was possible on the guitar. That blows me away. One of my favorite tracks, Sean Got the Shotgun, off of the Doom 2 soundtrack, I immediately knew, yo, that would sound sick on a drop-tuned 7-string. And that's really the thing that ultimately inspired me to want to recreate all of these songs and put my own spin on them. Something like Sign of Evil just reminded me of like For the Love of God by Steve Vai, you know, just one of those tunes where the electric guitar just holds this melody, and all of the nuance in the guitar player's performance can just add so much more to that melody that wasn't possible in just its regular MIDI form. Which brings us to Doom Volume 1 and Doom Volume 2. As you may or may not have noticed, the music throughout this video is from Doom, but it's not in its original MIDI form. After playing through both Doom and Doom 2 during the pandemic, the songs just got me so inspired that I decided for my next round of guitar reviews, and for releases as well onto Spotify and iTunes, I wanted to dive into these tracks and put my own spin on them. Almost the way jazz musicians in the 50s or 60s would take stuff from the Great American Songbook and put their own spin on it, reharmonize them, add their own solos and all that kind of stuff, was kind of my approach for my 2 cover EPs. From both Doom and Doom 2, I picked my favorite tracks, the ones that I thought were the most varied, the ones that really stuck with me, that I thought had really solid themes or a really solid hook. Some of those songs were really just a shell of a song with not a whole lot to it, so something like Sean's Got the Shotgun or The Demon's Dead, those tracks were really missing a theme altogether, and that really gave me a space to come up with my own thing that made me really excited to see what I could do with what Bobby Prince had already started with. So for other songs, like the iconic At Doom's Gate or Untitled, I would take what was already there and come up with my own rhythm guitar part and then potentially theme that I came up with over top of it to end the song. One of the cool things about the Doom songs from the soundtrack is that almost all of them are written in a way where they're supposed to loop more or less seamlessly. Now this is really cool as you're playing through the game, because then the song doesn't end and then restart. That would be kind of stupid and sound kind of silly. But it gave me a unique opportunity to come up with an ending for the song. How did I think these tracks should end? So for some of these tracks, I'm really proud of what I ended up coming up with. At Doom's Gate stuck with me as a really memorable rhythm guitar part. I basically took the harmony and all the suggested sort of movement and came up with my own thing. Facing the Spider was another one that was really just a shell of a song. Had a really cool kind of hook, but not a whole lot else going on yet. And again, I came up with my own rhythm guitar part to end the song, kind of going into like a halftime break. In something like Untitled, I came up with this kind of quirky reggae part for the bridge of the song, and then specifically chose these melodic minor colorations and lines of the harmony that I'm really proud of what I ultimately ended up coming up with. The thing is, I may have bitten off a little bit more than I could chew. This really was no small task. In my mind, when I originally sat down to get working on it, it felt like, well, I'm just going to transcribe what's there, add a couple solos, and boom, we'll be done. The problem I quickly realized was that, yeah, these songs were not finished. I was going to have to write my own parts. So the fact that the songs didn't really have endings meant that there was more time in composition than I had originally had intended. There was also the not small task of transcribing, learning, and ultimately being able to play a lot of those shreddy bits from the different songs. Now, whereas all of them, like I said earlier, I could hear and tell how they were played on the guitar, doesn't mean that it was easy to be able to pull them off and execute it, and some of them were extra tricky. This also meant I needed to recreate all of those keyboard parts and program all of the drums. I was also going to play and record the bass, the rhythm guitar, the lead guitar. I would write my new creations, sections, textures, and add in all of those tracks, which sometimes meant extra clean guitar textures. I then also had to take the time to go back in and improve on the drums. I needed to add ghost notes on the snare. I needed to add in the dynamics in the drum programming to make it sound real, to make my recreation not sound like more just MIDI. And all of that stuff takes time and takes energy. And when you're working on your 11th song and you're really just getting burnout and you want it to be done, it's hard to keep that passion up. I then also had the not small task of mixing and mastering all 11 tracks. Yes, I do actually do it all myself. I know that is kind of stupid, but it is what it is. Then there was also the small matter of shooting and editing all of the guitar playthroughs to then include in the release of each album, as well as the guitar reviews, because all of my recreations connected to my 11 guitar reviews. So each track was recorded on a different guitar, which presented its own unique challenge of some of the guitars were pretty crappy. So how do I try to keep these tracks up to a certain standard, right? I don't want to put out something that sounds terrible, but I'm trying to record it on a $300 Ibanez that objectively sounds terrible. And all of those things equal more and more time and more energy. Being as I don't log my work hours, and I probably really should, I'm guessing around 300 hours is probably a conservative estimate of the amount of time that I put into my covers of Doom Volume 1 and Doom Volume 2. And honestly, I couldn't be happier for how this whole project has turned out. I'm immensely proud of the way the tracks sound sonically, both from a mix and as well as being able to polish those couple turd guitars along the way, but also just for how I think I was able to cohesively write endings and come up with themes and really kind of do these songs the justice that they deserved. So in the end, I just love Doom and what this game represents and what it is as a creative, artistic package. It's so cohesive, it's so well thought out and well designed, and all of these different themes of the game serve to reinforce each other in this really engaging and enjoyable way that I honestly didn't think was possible from an old school game, something like this from the 90s. I also had a pretty similar experience as my wife and I played through Super Mario 3 on the original Nintendo. Very similar experience where I was so surprised at how well thought out the level and game design was and how memorable a lot of those, again, MIDI bleeps and bloops in those old school video game scores really are. I think really for the last 10 to 15 years in particular, the video game industry has had such a focus on graphic fidelity that it's easy to forget about all of the simple game design elements that makes a game fantastic. Who cares about ray tracing or how good a game looks if the gameplay sucks or if the game loop is boring or not engaging? Yes, I'm looking at you, GTA Online. You can be unbelievably boring at times. What both Romero and Carmack and that entire creative team at id Software was able to accomplish back in the 90s really is absolutely incredible, and it definitely holds up today. And I'd argue it's going to hold up forever. It's the same thing that makes a good board game, or playing poker with your friends never go out of style. And it's that way that modern gaming, I think, has lost its way with its obsession with graphics above almost anything else. So the two pieces of advice I would give you if you decide to go back and revisit these old games is one, make sure you're playing a good port of it, because obviously if it's a crappy version of the game, it's going to be crappy. I recently tried out the one on the PlayStation Store and it's absolutely terrible. So GZ Doom, that was perfectly fine for me. I know you can jump and all the other things that people don't like in that game, but find a good version of Doom to play, whether it's Crispy Doom or GZ Doom, honestly, in my opinion, is fine. The other thing would be make sure you play it with a good set of either headphones or speakers. If you play it with crappy speakers, you're gonna miss out everything that makes the original score so cool, makes the sound design totally pop and hold up today.